Hey, how's it going? I am Daniel, and today we're going to be talking about the Xbox Series S. So, whether or not you just got yourself a Series S, or maybe you're about to buy one, or you're waiting to pick one up, or maybe you're just on the fence, I want to go ahead and kind of make a video giving you some of the basics and some must knows that just the general consumer should probably think about or at least consider before jumping right in. Now, the biggest thing with the Xbox Series S is there are really three main things that people typically kind of get told about the console, and that ultimately boils down to whether or not most people will even consider the Series S. Now, I think the Series S fits perfectly as a standalone upgrade from to next gen from the Xbox One S if you're doing that. Maybe even the Xbox One X if your primary concern is faster loading times and getting the games and being in that game session quicker. The system is also perfect for things like being a companion console to your PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4, with Sony releasing their exclusives across both generations going forward, and for the time being, considering they're having such crazy problems producing PlayStation 5s, it only makes sense that to have the best of both worlds, you might as well pick up a Series S along with the PlayStation 4 you currently own, or if you're upgrading to the PS5, that could be a viable option as well. And the third kind of situation I think that it makes the most sense is maybe you're a PC player and you're just looking for a box to kind of put in the living room, whether it's for streaming your movies and such if you don't have a smart TV or you don't really prefer its user interface, or maybe you're just looking for a way to play some of the games that you have on PC, maybe from Game Pass or just certain titles that you kind of wouldn't mind playing in a more casual environment like your living room on a couch on a bigger television. Right? So these are just a handful of things. If you're also a new gamer, that could be the Series S could be the absolute perfect console because its entry price is very low and its barrier to access its games is also extremely cheap. It's at the point where for $15 you get access to so many great games, and if there comes a point where you can't afford it for 1 month or something, you can just not pay that and kind of focus on your priorities. So that's always a good selling point for the system as well. But with that being said, there are, like I said, a few things that I think are really important to go over, and a lot of people just kind of give you the basic headline, right? Something that you would kind of read starting off the article, and they never really dive deep in or even give you solutions or the realistic, problems, right? Are these actual problems for you? It could be just for them, but maybe it doesn't really affect you or not as much as you may think it would. So I want to go ahead and dive into those right now. Now, before we get started, I do want to ask you to please subscribe, like this video, comment down below if you have anything that I didn't cover in mind, or maybe you have some more questions after the end of this video. I do, invite you to stick to the end. My DMs are always open on Twitter as well, so if that is something you're interested in and want to contact me more directly for, questions, comments, anything like that, I will have the link to that in the description down below. So the first and biggest thing that I think is the drawback of the Series S right there is ultimately the fact that it is an all-digital system, and this can be a good and bad thing. On one hand, it's very minimalist. It's a very clean setup. You don't have to worry about having a shelf of discs or anything like that. And I personally find it perfect for something as playing games from Game Pass. I personally only own one Xbox title disc because I do have a Series X as well in my living room, specifically for those deep immersive single player games. And the one disc game that I do have is Guardians of the Galaxy, and that is just because it was a Black Friday sale and I was able to get it cheaper than digital, and that is one of the benefits of also going physical. So if you're not a fan of going all digital, then you may want to consider the Series X, or you maybe even a used One X if you're not already on that, because there is a benefit to having the discs. You can resell them, you can put them on a shelf, maybe you want to collect them. That's something I do personally, so I can understand that point. But if you're looking for a box that will play games and get the job done, that is something to consider. Is, are you okay with going all digital? Right? Because like I said, down the line, if you're looking to sell this system or whatever, you're kind of going to be screwed on that end on whether or not you'll have access to that library to resell if you need quick cash or want to upgrade to a newer system or something else, right? Maybe you kind of give up on gaming. You're not into it anymore. That's kind of a caveat. If you have a back library of games coming from older Xbox titles, one of the biggest benefits to the Xbox platform as a whole is backwards compatibility. So if you have older titles, maybe from original Xbox, and you never really got into gaming, but now you are because of the way the world is or whatever it may be, you couldn't bring those over. However, to be fair, with Game Pass, a lot of those, exclusive Xbox titles have been ported and brought over to Game Pass, and you will get things like FPS boost, so they will run in higher frame rates and such. But at the end of the deal, the reason I put this in step one is because ultimately, if you just can't stomach having an all-digital platform, then you could probably click away from this video right now because the Series S just isn't going to be for you. So the second thing I kind of want to touch on, and this is one of the more bigger problems that people seemingly have with the Series S, and it's justifiable to an extent, but I think it is vastly overplayed the way people like to talk about it. And what I'm referring to is the available internal memory of the console. The system ships with 512 gigabytes of internal, SSD memory, and that is, I think, about 364 gigabytes after all said and done, because ultimately the Series S does need to have space allocated to it to boot up the user interface, the operating system that runs the Xbox, all the internal applications that come with the system, and that needs to have its own place. And why these systems and manufacturers haven't, created a boot drive as you would potentially have on a PC to kind of allocate all that for the internal stuff and then let you have full access to that, a full 512 gigabytes or 1 terabyte, whatever it may be, is really beyond me. I don't understand it. But nonetheless, that's what it is. And the reason I wanted to kind of, this is going to be one of the longer sections. So the reason I want to touch on that more specifically is because it's not as cut and dry as it has no space. Because ultimately speaking, coming from experience, coming from me using both the Series S and the Series X, I have a lot of games. I download a lot of games. And with that being said, I ultimately have needed to expand my storage on both systems regardless. So saying that you want the Series X because it has that extra data, if that's like really your main selling point, right, you can get by without the disk drive. You're not too worried about the extra horsepower under the hood of the Series X. And your main caveat to looking at the Series S is just its available storage. Well, ultimately speaking, you're kind of just prolonging the problem on the Series X, right? That extra $200 that you're spending on the Series X, you're still going to have to upgrade the memory at some point. I myself have purchased a 1 terabyte expansion card from Seagate for both the Series S and the Series X, and that's just the reality of things. Now, there are 3 methods that I do recommend when it comes to managing your data, and hopefully this helps you out and makes you realize that, hey, this isn't as big of a deal as it is, because realistically speaking, we've had consoles in the past ship with 500 gigabytes. That's kind of been the norm going forward. And it wasn't until the later end of that generation that we've seen 1 terabyte systems, right? And even 2 terabyte systems in some instances. So while it does seem kind of weird that they would, offer a system that has, I guess, over 500 gigabytes, but, so little space comparatively, I think it's just kind of, you kind of have to put it into perspective of what you're getting in terms of the speed of that memory. So the way to manage it, I think there are 3 main things that you should consider. Now, the first one is ultimately just dealing with it. I mean, that's going to be your cheapest option, is if you have good internet or maybe you only play a couple games at a time. Ultimately speaking, the Xbox Series S's internal memory is manageable. The only game that I avoid completely, and not only because of the memory, but also because it's got its own problems, is Call of Duty Warzone. So ultimately speaking, if that is a game that you're interested in and you're worried about, wow, that's going to take up all my internal memory, that's a valid point. But I have another note on that on the second part of this. But most of the games I'm able to fit realistically about, I want to say 3 or 4 like legitimate games, right, on the Series S before I'm feeling, oh, I need to delete something to, you know, download a new game. So again, it really depends on your play style. If you play a lot of games, if you know you're going to be downloading games left and right to try, then yes, this isn't going to be the solution for you. The second option is going to be, you know, buying a cheap external hard drive, and that's going to be bringing up the, you know, Warzone game again. That game itself has not been optimized for Series X and S, so it can run from an external hard drive. So even if you buy the Series S just to play the handful of or try the next gen titles, if you're only really playing a game like Warzone, if that's your primary game that you play, then you can run that off of a, you know, cheap $60 500 gigabyte hard drive or 1 terabyte hard drive, or even an SSD, and get slightly faster load times, just obviously not on the same level as the internal. Now, this is also a solution because you can purchase, I mean, ultimately as large of a size of, you know, hard drive or SSD that you want, and just transfer the games back and forth. If your internet is slow, you can download the games initially on the hard drive and then transfer them from the external drive to the internal memory back and forth as needed. This does take some planning, it is a little bit of managing, but when it comes to getting the job done, that is going to be the most cost-efficient way to do it. Now, coming to the final thing that I recommend personally is just buy the expansion card, because as I mentioned before, even if you get the Series X, you're going to end up needing the expansion card, because I downloaded Battlefield and Call of Duty and Halo and a couple of, you know, small titles here and there that my kids like to play, and ultimately speaking, the internal memory was done. There was no way around that. I just kind of prolonged the problem, right? So if you're looking to really just solve the problem right out the bat, ultimately speaking, just buying the expansion card. And I think as of now, there are other options as well. You don't have to go with the 1 terabyte. So if you're looking to just download your base games, you can buy just another 500 gigabytes of, you know, from the expansion card, and that'll give you the same speeds, the same, you know, stuff that you need to play those optimized next generation games. But with that said, the memory part of it, I think, yes, while it is a legitimate concern for many, for most, I don't think that it's really as big of a deal as people are making out to be. I get by just fine on the Series S, and I play primarily on the Series S. Like I mentioned before, the Series X is in my living room connected to a 4K TV, specifically just for those, you know, single-player games that I want to play, that, or if I want to play the campaign of a game like Call of Duty, for example. Coming off of that, one important thing that I'm noting is I do have it hooked up to a 4K monitor. The monitor I have my Series S connected to is a 1080p high refresh rate gaming monitor. I have a TV in the living room that is 4K and can do 120 frames per second, but it can't do both. It doesn't have the newest HDMI format. So I have to choose 4K 60, or I think I can drop on the Series X 1440p resolution to, you know, and get that 120 frames per second. However, I'm okay with just, you know, the games that I play out there, just sticking with the 60 frames per second, getting that full resolution. And this is the third and final part of the Series S that I want to really dive into, because this is a selling point for next gen. I understand completely that the point of next gen systems, right, looking at it, what am I getting compared to my PS4 or my Xbox One, is 4K resolution, which is debatable because we did have a half step, right? We had the PS4 Pro and we had the Xbox One X, which both supported 4K resolutions in their own ways. And the Series S, you know, is no different. It can support a 4K resolution. When people say it can't do that, that's really just referring to the fact that, I mean, most games don't, or they choose to prioritize something better. These developers know what is important to make their game a good experience. And that's what the Series S ultimately is about, is, are you having a good experience? Is the Series S going to deliver you the game in a fun and inviting way? Are you going to get immersed by playing the games on the Series S? And I can tell you, honest, without a doubt, I love playing on the Series S. I do never have an experience, even if I play the same game back to back from my living room to the desk here. I never feel like I'm having a worse experience. I never feel like I'm missing out. Oh, I should be playing this on the Series X in here or something like that, because that's just not the case. When people tell you that the Series S can't do this or that it's worse than the Series X, that's kind of a lie, because the Series S can do 4K. It can do 120 frames per second. It can do these things. Can it do it at the same time? No. Can it do it to its maximum potential? No. Is the 4K native? No. But let me tell you, I have had the Series S originally hooked up to my TV in the living room, and I was using it in a 4K 60 mode. A lot of the games I was playing were being upscaled to 4K. And yes, that resolution does drop occasionally below 4K into the 1900 range, and there are some games that may even go lower to make sure that that frame rate, sticks to 60 or whatever it is, and that's up to the developer, right? That's the important thing. It's not that the system cannot do it. It's the fact that the developer is choosing to prioritize one thing over another to make sure the game stays running smooth. So when someone tells you that the Series S cannot do this or that, it is ultimately really out of context. Unless you're talking about a specific game. If you're talking to someone about a game and they're saying this game cannot run at that on this, right, on the Series S, that's a different conversation. And if that is something that bothers you, then look at the Series X and see if that $200 is going to give you exactly what you want, right? The Series S may have to dip into the 1900 to 1440 range on a 4K TV, while the Series X can stick to the 4K. But are you going to notice the difference between the 1440 drops here and there, maybe during busy action scenes or cut scenes that aren't really vital to seeing it in full 4K, right? So this is one of those things that are very subjective. So I don't want to really tell you one way or another if it matters or not, because to me, I can get by either way. I play in 1080 on a 27-inch. I play in 4K on a 65-inch. And I've had them swapped. I've moved these two systems back and forth between the rooms, and I enjoy the experience 100% of the time. And that's it. That's what it comes down to, is I enjoy the experience. Now, when it comes to frame rate, that's another thing. There are some games that will run in a higher frame rate, but is it the kind of game that matters? I haven't come across a game on the Series S that runs in 30 frames per second or less. I know there are some people out there, and there are certain channels out there that will tell you that this game cannot perform in this frame rate. And if that's what matters to you, if you ultimately care about the frame rate, then realistically speaking, maybe you shouldn't even be looking at a console. Maybe you should be looking at building a PC, because if you care that much about frame rate, a PC will probably be for you. But I play on the Series S, I play Call of Duty, I get 120 frames per second. Yes, there's some drops here and there during extreme crazy scenes, like in multiplayer when, someone's dropping a glide bomb or a mortar strike or whatever it is on my area. That shakiness and everything that's going on, it can kind of drop the frame rates, but not to the point where it's unplayable. It goes from 120 to like 90, right? So you're still getting high refresh rate. In my opinion, anything over 60 is a high refresh rate, because that's kind of what we've been dealing with for so long, and ultimately even less than that. There are a lot of games on the Xbox One X even that, yes, you can get that nice native 4K, but you're running most of those games in 30 frames per second, right? So it really kind of is subjective, but I want to at least let you know that if these are the things you're hearing, you need to just kind of take them with a grain of salt, unless it's specific to a game that you really care about. And then you have to ask yourself, is that extra $200 really worth that difference, right? Is that extra $200 really worth the extra 40 frames per second or 30 frames per second that you're getting, depending on what it is, or that extra resolution bump, right? I mean, there is a lot more to come with the Series X in that for that $200, but it really boils down to you and what your wallet is doing, right? So that's really all it is, honestly. I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't think I really have too much more to say. Those are really the main points. is just, is the Series S going to be good for you? Are you going to be able to live with it? Maybe you've ordered one and you're kind of going into it blind. I want to make sure that you understand that these very talked about topics and subjects of the Series S are ultimately very much overplayed, and they are they're blown out of proportion a lot of the times. And I want to give you my honest feedback that the Series S is a stellar console. And if you're not jumping into next generation because you are working on getting the next gen console and the next newest TV and this and that, you need to just kind of stop it. I don't really have any other way to put that. Just don't worry about it. The Series S plays just fine. It works just as good as the Series X. The Series X does some things better, some things smoother, some things nicer. That's a fact. But ultimately speaking, for $200 extra, I could do a lot more with that $200. Right? I could go buy a 4K, a 32-inch 4K TV at Walmart for that extra $200 and then play in 4K 60. Some of these TVs even support 1080 120 or 720 120, I guess, for whatever reason, depending on how cheap the manufacturer is. So just keep that in mind. If you've got the money, then I don't know why you're watching this, because if you're going to go out and buy it anyway, then go out and buy a Series X. You know what I mean? But if you're on a budget, if you're new to gaming, if you're not sure, if you're kind of on the fence, this guy's going to do it for you. I promise. Okay, guys, so that's it. Thank you for watching. If you've made it to the end, comment down below. Just say the Series S is awesome. And like I said before, let me know if you have anything to add to the conversation. If you have your own opinions on the Series S, if you have more questions, I'll be more than happy. I have my notifications turned on, so as you should as well, subscribe and ring that bell. Make sure that you're getting my content. I'm going to be doing more videos like this, more videos about the Series S, and making sure that you guys get realistic, expectations. I'm not sitting here hooking this up to a computer, giving you every exact frame rate that you're going to get with each game. I don't do that, right? I don't compare this to a lot of other consoles at this point. I've kind of accepted that the Series S is its own special place, and what matters the most is if you buy into that place, will you enjoy it? So that's what I'm here to tell you guys, and I hope that you would like to stick around for that. I also, like I mentioned before, my Twitter is down below. Please DM me, go follow me over there. Whenever I upload, I will try sharing that to Twitter, because I know the notification system on YouTube is a little jank. So, do with that what you will. Anyway, guys, I will see you in the next one. Bye.